A voice came out of the hush, and the hush did not give up voices. Yara Haddad had her boots up on the dead console and a bulb of cooling tea going skin warm in her hand when the dead band, the band that carried nothing, that had carried nothing for the 4 years she'd minded the 9-chain, coughed up 3 seconds of someone alive. Rough, layered, a growl under it that no human throat made. The words came apart before she could hold them, but the shape of them was a shape she knew in any language, because every species that ever went to space made the same sound at the same moment. Somebody was calling for help. The 9-chain was 9 inherited comms buoys strung along the frontier edge like beads on a fraying line, and Yara was the person the Reach paid to keep them warm. It was not a job anybody wanted. It was a job she'd taken because it was hers alone. 400,000 kilometers of nobody and a journeyman comms relay ticket that no auditor was ever going to come all the way out here to nitpick. The station was a can. The can smelled like hot electronics and the particular sourness of a recycler filter 3 months past its swap date, because the swap filters were on a supply run that was, per the manifest, 16 days late and counting. She talked to the buoys. Everyone out here talked to something. Buoy 4 had a flutter in its Keepalive that she'd named. She called it 4's cough, and she had long ago stopped pretending she wasn't fond of it. The hush was the other thing out here, and the hush she did not talk to. It sat off the chain's far end, a wedge of nothing, maybe a light hour deep, and it was called the hush because that was what it did to signal. You could throw a handshake at it all day. The handshake went in and did not come back, not refused because refused you could work with, but unanswered, like a door with no one behind it. Except the door was a region of space the size of a small system. And the inherited network that ran the whole galaxy's comms had quietly decided, long before humans showed up to mind it, that it would route nothing through there. The charts marked it no relay. The buoys, left to themselves, bent their traffic around it without being told. She had asked about it once, in certification, why the chain dog-legged at buoy 7. The instructor had said and moved on. That was the whole of the Reach's institutional curiosity on the subject. So a voice coming out of the hush was strictly impossible. In the way a lot of things involving the inherited tech were impossible right up until they happened to you personally at 300 station time with cold tea in your hand. Yara put the tea down. She pulled the headset off her neck, settled the taped cup over her ear, and brought up the spike. The spike was hers, a licensed signal analyzer she'd gutted and married to a Vask-built reader she'd bought off a scrap crew 2 postings ago, the kind of tool that did not appear in any Reach equipment register and never would. It saw things the certified gear politely declined to see. She walked it down the dead band, and the dead band, for the first time in 4 years, had something on it. A carrier, weak, bleeding, and riding under it in pulses too ragged to be anything but a person doing it by hand. A Vask mayday. "She did the thing you do," she answered. Yara opened a channel. A real channel, the certified way. Handshake out, wait for the handshake back, establish, talk. The nearest buoy threw the handshake toward the hush. Nothing came back. She tried buoy 8, closer to the edge. She tried angling it off 7. She tried the thing you are not supposed to do, a raw broadband shout with no handshake at all, which the buoy obediently refused to send, because a buoy with no completed handshake is, as far as the inherited tech is concerned, talking to no one, and the tech does not waste itself talking to no one. 40 minutes. The carrier under the dead band kept bleeding its ragged pulses, the same shape over and over, a person who did not know whether anyone could hear, sending the only thing they had on the only thing that crossed. She could hear them. She could not answer them. That was a specific kind of awful she had not signed up for. She kicked the report up the line to the nearest accord relay, because that was procedure, and because some part of her still believed procedure was for something. The relay was a Sewell commercial registry node, 40 light minutes coreward, and it answered the way the accord always answered, eventually and in the shape of a no.
"The registry acknowledges your notice. The vessel you describe carries no Accord transit registration. The coordinates you describe lie within a charted non-relay zone, excluded from a cord recovery obligation. No asset will be tasked. The registry thanks you for your compliance.
Yara stared at the readout for a moment.
There's a person in there.
The registry acknowledges your notice.
So that was the accord. The accord had said its piece, and its piece was that a Vask freelancer who'd cut a corner too close to the hush was, procedurally, weather, not a rescue, a non-event in a non-relay zone. Which left Yara, 4 years deep in a tin can, 1 journeyman ticket, 9 old buoys, and a carrier she could hear and could not answer. So she looked at the carrier again. Really looked with the spike, the way you look at a thing when the easy answers are gone and the only ones left are the kind nobody certifies. Because here was what did not add up. The handshakes died. Every channel she threw at the hush went in and never came back. But the carrier under the dead band was getting out of the hush all the way to her. Something was crossing that boundary in both directions. Just not the something anyone built a channel out of. She pulled the buoy chain's housekeeping logs, the boring stuff, the stuff nobody reads, the Keepalives. Every buoy in the inherited network sang the same dumb song a few times a minute, a heartbeat that meant only a signal so low and so constant that the network treated it as plumbing rather than speech. And the Keepalives crossed the hush. They always had. 4 years of her own logs admitted it. The heartbeats went into the dark and came back, faithful, untouched, while every real word died at the door. The hush refused channels, it did not refuse heartbeats. And the Vask in there was writing a heartbeat, because a dying ship's distress beacon is the dumbest, lowest, most stubborn signal it has, and it was the only thing of theirs the hush would carry. Yara checked the carrier's drift. The pulses were Doppler smeared, sliding lower, frame by frame. The ship wasn't holding position. It was falling, deeper in, on a vector the deadband's own geometry let her read like a thrown stone. She ran it twice. The second time she didn't like it any better. On that heading, in something under 5 hours, the ship would slide past the last buoy whose Keepalive still reached. After that, there would be no heartbeat to hear and no heartbeat to answer. The Vask would simply quietly stop being a signal at all. 5 hours to do an impossible thing with plumbing. You cannot send a message on a heartbeat. A heartbeat has no room in it for a message. That is the whole point of a heartbeat. It says one thing forever so that nobody has to think about it. But Yara had spent 4 years listening to For's cough. A cough is a heartbeat with information in it, even when the only information is, if she could make a buoy's Keepalive cough on purpose, stutter it, lengthen it, bend the gap between the beats, then the gap between the beats could carry something. Not words, not voice, but long, short, long. The oldest code people ever beat into a wall when the wall was all they had. The licensing documentation had a word for what she was about to do to a certified inheritance buoy's housekeeping layer. The word was don't in bold with a clause number. Touching the Keepalive risked desynchronizing the buoy from the network, and a desynced buoy could drop off the chain and not come back. And a journeyman who bricked an inherited buoy could expect to spend the rest of a short career counting filter stock on a rock somewhere worse than this. Yara found the clause, read it twice, and then did the most reach thing a person could do, which was to write the clause number down in her log next to the time, so that whoever audited her later would at least know she had understood exactly which rule she was breaking and why. Then she reached into Buoy 8's housekeeping layer and taught its heartbeat to stutter. It took her 40 minutes to get a clean stutter and another 20 to be sure the buoy hadn't dropped off the chain. Then she sent the simplest thing she could think of, the thing that meant the same in every code anyone ever built out of long and short. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, over and over, into the dark, on a heartbeat. For a long time, the carrier just bled its ragged mayday, unchanged, and Yara sat with the specific cold of wondering whether the person on the other end even knew a heartbeat could be made to talk. Then the mayday stopped. And the carrier, weak, smeared, a person doing it by hand on a dying beacon, sent back 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, Yara laughed once, an ugly, delighted bark in the empty can, and got to work building a language out of nothing with a stranger she would never see. It was slow. It was unbearably slow. A heartbeat does not beat fast. The gaps she could safely bend were small, and every exchange crawled across a light hour and back. She built it up in pieces, the way you teach a code to someone who already half knows the idea. Numbers first, then yes and no, then a brutal little vocabulary of only the words that mattered. Hear you, hold, name. The answer came back over 4 slow minutes, letter by letter, a person spending precious beacon power to tell her who they were, because being no one is worse than dying. R-E-S-S. Over the next hour, in long and short, across a light hour of dark, Yara Haddad and a Vask named Res had the slowest conversation of either of their lives. Res was young. Yara could not have said how she knew, except that the panic underneath the discipline read young, the way a new contractor's first hot bay reads young. Res had been running a thin route along the Hush's edge, the kind of route you take when your cargo is the kind that doesn't love checkpoints, and the Hush had reached. That was Res's word for it. Beaten out letter by letter, reached. The drive had thrown a handshake to the network for a routine nav fix. The way drives do 10 times an hour without anyone thinking about it. And the Hush had taken the handshake and not given it back, and without a nav fix, the drive had safed itself. A ship with a safe drive on the edge of the Hush does not stay on the edge of the Hush. It falls in. The drive would still burn. Res could light it by hand. What Res could not do was aim. No nav fix, no network, no stars they could trust through the Hush's haze, nothing to tell a tumbling ship which way was out. Burn blind, and you burn deeper as easily as free. So Res had not burned. Res, young, alone, in a dying ship in a place the network itself was afraid of, had done the disciplined thing and the terrible thing, which was to hold position and call for help and trust that the universe contained someone who would answer. The universe contained Yara. It was not much. It would have to do. Yara had the picture Res didn't. From the chain she could read the ship's drift like a thrown stone. Vector, rate, the slow curve of its fall. She could compute the heading that clawed back toward the edge, and the burn it would take, and the moment to light it. She could work out to the second the one thing Res needed and could not see. She just had to send it through a heartbeat, across a light hour, before the ship fell past the last buoy that could carry the beat. She did the math on the message itself, and her stomach dropped. A heading was a number with enough digits to matter. A burn time was another. A go count was a third. In the bandwidth of a stuttering Keepalive, that was not a sentence. That was an essay. And she checked and hated it, a little over 2 hours of Keepalive range left before the drift took Res out of reach. The stutter was too slow. She had built a telegraph that could say hold before the window shut. It could not say everything a blind pilot needed to aim a burn. Not in time. Not on one buoy's gentle, careful, network-safe little heartbeat. She needed the heartbeat louder. She needed a buoy to shout. You could overdrive a buoy. Of course you could. You could overdrive anything if you stopped caring what happened to it after. A buoy's Keepalive ran at a trickle of its power budget because a heartbeat is supposed to last forever, and forever is cheap when you go slow. Push that power up. Dump the buoy's whole reserve into the housekeeping layer. Beat harder, beat faster, bend bigger gaps. And the heartbeat could carry a real payload across a light hour in the time she had. It would also, almost certainly, cook the buoy. The inherited tech did not love being asked to do things it wasn't built to do. The Keepalive layer wasn't rated for that draw. She would be running the oldest part of an ancient machine flat out. In a way, its makers, whoever they were, wherever they had gone, had built it specifically never to do. Buoy 8 had been on this chain longer than the reach had existed. It had a kept warm heartbeat with a flutter just starting in it, one she'd have named given another year. She was about to spend it. Yara thought about the accord relay, 40 light minutes coreward, acknowledging her notice. She thought about a Vask kid holding position in the dark because they trusted the universe to contain somebody who would answer. She logged the clause number. Then she dumped Buoy 8's reserve into its heart and made the old machine scream the only word it had. The buoy held. For now, Yara watched its temperature climb on the spike and started sending, fast and hard, faster than was safe, the numbers Rest needed, heading, burn duration, and the count because a blind pilot cannot pick the moment. So Yara would pick it for them, and Rest would light the drive not when Rest chose, but when a stranger a light hour away said. She sent it twice to be sure. The acknowledgement crawled back. Heading copy, burn copy. Then after a gap long enough that she found herself leaning toward the board as if leaning could close a light hour.
If wrong heading, we burn deeper, yes?
Yara looked at the number she had computed off 4-year-old logs and a drift she had read like a thrown stone and a chain that was one overdriven buoy away from blind.
Yeah.
The gap that came back was the longest yet. Yara filled it with the sound of the recycler and For's cough 2 boards over and her own heart, which was, she noticed, keeping time. Then Ress answered.
You answered. The Accord did not. I burn on your count.
The count was the worst part. Yara had built a telegraph out of a heartbeat and a stranger out of long and short, and now all of it came down to a number going down, sent 1 pulse at a time across a light hour, each beat a second of buoy 8's life she was spending and could not get back. The buoy's temperature was past every line the documentation drew. She watched the numbers climb and the count fall and did not let herself do the arithmetic on which would finish first. 10, the carrier held. 9, 4's cough, faithful, 2 boards over. She sent the beats. The dark sent nothing back, because there was nothing to send back yet. A blind pilot on a manual burn has no breath to spare for telegraphy. Yara was sending into a silence and trusting it the way Ress was trusting her, which was completely, and with no evidence at all. Sir 3. 2. Now. She held the last pulse a half beat long, the way you lean on a word that matters, and then there was nothing left to do. Nothing at all. The most she had was sent. Buoy 8, screaming its old heart out, carried her now into the hush, and she had no way to know whether a Vask kid had lit a drive on it. The carrier died. Not faded, died between one beat and the next. The ragged mayday and the stutter and all of it, gone. The dead band dead again, the way it had been dead for 4 years. Yara sat in the can with the headset's taped cup against her ear and listened to absolutely nothing and understood that this was the answer. That silence was the only answer the hush ever gave. That she had spent a buoy and a night and a piece of herself to throw a number into a place that ate numbers, and the handshake completed. 1 buoy down the chain, at the very edge of the hush, a channel she had not opened, snapped shut and live in the same instant. A drive's nav system coming back online the way they do when they cross out of the dark and find the network waiting, throwing a handshake to the first buoy in reach. Because that is what they are built to do 10 times an hour without anyone thinking about it. Ress's ship was at the edge. Ress's ship was out. The channel was thin, and it would not last. Ress was at the boundary, not past it, and the ship was heard in ways a safe drive doesn't fix. But a thin channel was a channel, a real one, handshake and all. And for the first time in 5 hours, Yara Haddad could simply to the person she had been beating numbers at all night.
Tender, I am out. The wrench named Hesk and I are out.
Yara did not know what a wrench named Hesk was. She gathered, from the way Ress said it, that it was the part of the answer that mattered most to Ress, and that someday it might be a story she would be allowed to hear.
Copy that, Ress. Burn for the coreward marker, slow, and let the network carry you. There's a Soul registry node out there that owes you exactly nothing. Go lean on it anyway.
The buoy. The one that called. It is dead.
It was. Buoy 8 had gone dark at the boundary, its old fluttering heart spent flat. 8 beads on the line now, instead of 9. Yara would file it as a casualty of a power transient, which was true the way the clause numbers in her log were true. Accurate, complete, and silent about the part that mattered.
Yeah.
Before the channel thinned for good, Yara asked why a runner had been cutting that close to a place the whole network refused to enter. Ress answered slow. not like a frightened kid now, but like someone reciting a thing learned young.
We do not fly where the old gear goes quiet. The quiet is kept. Older than the Accord, older than us. My elders had a word. It does not cross to your speech.
Then the channel was gone, and Yara was alone with 8 buoys. She pulled the Keepalive logs and read the heartbeats, not like plumbing, but like a map. The buoys bending their beats around the dark in a curve, and the curve had a center. The network wasn't avoiding empty space. It was keeping its distance from something built by someone long gone to be left alone. She marked the center on her chart beside the words "no relay" and put the kettle on, because she was still against the odds in the Accord both, the person out here who answered.